Hi, this is James Gordon October here with a book review. Today's book we'll be talking about today, The Conqueror Worms by Brian Keene. This is published by Leisure Books in May 2006. This was a really disappointing novel. I was really expecting this to be a really good, mid 2000s monster horror novel, and what I got was a real dud. There are so many things I dislike with this book. There's no likable characters. The main character is very boring. There's hardly any monster destruction or action in this book. It doesn't really go anywhere. It just kind of takes place in one area, and that's it. And I felt this author had some really interesting ideas, but he could have fleshed them out and delivered a much better horror novel. Instead, he just basically drops the ball and just writes a boring horror novel, and I just thought this could have been so much better. And there are a lot of other issues and problems I have with this book. I felt that at one point the author didn't know where to go with it, as he can't decide the giant worms, are they something are they mutated, are they supernatural, or are they related to Lovecraftian? Which I'll explain later on my review. Is I really get annoyed when I see authors start copying off of other authors, and they kind of use their work to tie it in with theirs. I don't like that. To me, it would have been better if he made something that's based off of, if he went the Lovecraftian route, have it where it's based off of Lovecraftian, but not directly tied with Lovecraftian's work. As I found it just be kind of lazy. You're just now essentially using someone else's idea for your story. It's kind of the same issue I had with Clickers, where it starts off as this monster novel about these scorpion crab hybrid creatures that start attacking this town in Maine, and then the one character found out that they're related to Lovecraftian, and then it went this whole Lovecraft route. I was like, you had it. Yeah, that book had a good start, but then it just completely just derailed. But anyway, this book was just a real disappointment. I have some other books by this author I want to check out. I did enjoy Castaways despite some issues I had with it, but this book sucked. This is definitely not worth reading, and I'll explain later in my review why you should just avoid this book. It's not worth reading at all. All right, onto the book. Okay, onto the review. Plot: Teddy Garrett, a 80-year-old man sitting in his rundown house while it's pouring rain outside and hasn't stopped for 41 days. Forcing himself to write in a notebook and recounting the events that happened, feeling his health is getting worse with no supplies left and a mysterious infection that's causing terrible pain. He hopes his diary will be useful to anyone who finds it before he dies. He then recounts his past. Before all this, Teddy and his siblings grew up in farm country, not much to do, but he worked hard and self-taught himself to read and write. At 14, he lied about his age to join the army in the 40s and fought both in Germany and in the Pacific. After returning from the war, he worked as a radio man and married Rose. They lived in West Virginia and had two children, a son and a daughter, Tracy and Doug. The couple is also religious, especially Rose. However, Doug was sent off to fight in the Vietnam War and was killed. His body was never recovered. Tracy got married and had two kids herself. Towards the 2000s, Teddy's life became worse. He lost Rose, then lost contact with Tracy and her grandkids. And just when things couldn't get worse, it began to rain and didn't stop. The weather got so bad, people began blaming weather reporters, with one blowing his brains out on live TV. The rain continued, causing states and other countries to be flooded. Teddy recounts events of seeing looters using boats and jet skis to take anything to survive, while National Guard chased after them, with the state becoming worse, with armies forcing people to leave major cities and towns. However, Teddy stays. Most of the U.S. is underwater, with Teddy being forced to leave and travel to Colorado, close by to the mountains of a small town, the only area that hasn't been flooded yet. The rain hasn't stopped and his health is getting worse. Unsure if anyone's still alive, Teddy tries to find anything to keep himself busy, but is becoming more and more depressed, and with food and drinks running low, he knows he isn't going to live much longer. He only had one friend, a robin, who would wake him every morning and would talk with the bird, as it wasn't happy with the weather, but would eat worms on the muddy ground. Teddy enjoyed having an animal visit him, but suddenly notices something wrong with the robin, seeing fungus growing on the bird, on one of it acting strange. Then, one foggy day, Teddy watched the bird having trouble flying, then was eaten by a large worm. Shocked by what he saw, he remains indoors for the next several days, but knows he needs to find food or he won't live much longer. Then one of his old friends, Carl, appears in his beat-up yellow truck, a few years younger than him. He lost his house along with his pet dog after a sinkhole swallowed up his home, and the death of his dog along with its puppies has upset him. Teddy allows Carl to stay as the two travel through the ghost town. They check on their neighbor's house, only to find the inside badly damaged along with a lot of dry blood. Both men find guns, ammo, and supplies. They then make a risky choice to visit Earl, a old mean racist man who threatens them at gunpoint to leave his land or else. The two of them leave with Carl telling Teddy about a giant worm he saw moving through the ground. Teddy reveals he saw it too. The following night, Teddy has a dream of being underwater. Then Rose appears warning him they are coming and people are going to fall out of the sky. He tries asking her what this is about, when suddenly she vomits worms as they swim towards him. Teddy wakes up to hear gunshots. He and Carl go to see what's going on. They see a helicopter flying low with a thick trail of smoke. It then crashes with Earl appearing armed with a rifle. He fired it, believing the government had come to take his land. Carl grabs a plank of wood and swings it hard, knocking Earl out cold. They take his rifle, carry him to the shed, and duct tape him, then lock him up inside. Teddy and Carl go over to the wreckage of the helicopter. The pilot is dead, however, the passengers survive. Kevin, Sarah, and Salty. Teddy explains what happened when suddenly the ground begins to shake. Then, rising through it, a worm the size of a school bus appears, chases after them. They go to use the rifle they took from Earl, but it's empty. Using a pickaxe and axe, they attack the worm as brown blood gushes out of it, then chase after him. They run through the forest towards Ted's house as Earl manages to break free and runs after them. Teddy barely makes it in as he collapses from a heart attack. The worm kills Earl. They are safe for now. Kevin explains how they got here as he and several other survivors were in New York while dealing with a Satanist cult that killed his friend Jimmy, finding his severed head floating in the water. Kevin is trying to keep everyone together with tension between them, the rising water, and sightings of a mermaid. Then two survivors are kidnapped by the cult, with Kevin and the others going to rescue them. Kevin fights a crazed leader who wants to sacrifice the two kidnapped survivors to the worm god. Kevin and the others kill him and the other members before fleeing the flooded city. After telling his story, Teddy's problems are only about to get worse when the worms launch a all-out assault on his house, with Earl leading the worms to attack them. Using anything to fight back, Teddy and the others struggle to defeat the powerful worms and the crazed Earl. Who will survive and who will become worm food? The Conqueror Worms was an awful horror novel. From its dry and confusing plot, dull, unlikable characters, little to no action happening, and its weak ending. This novel bored the living hell out of me. While the idea of a long rainstorm causing water levels to rise along with giant worms attacking sounded interesting, and having a few scenes of haunting scenery I liked. However, that isn't enough to save this boring novel. I really felt Brian didn't do much with the story or where to go with it. He wasn't sure if the giant worms are either something supernatural, part of a Satanist cult, or related to Lovecraftian. It isn't really well explained, as I'm not asking for a long backstory on what's causing all this to happen, just a simple explanation is all. It would have been great to see more of the giant worms causing mayhem and destruction, along with the raiders posing as another threat to the main characters while struggling to both survive and deal with the high water levels. And speaking of characters, I disliked Teddy, as having to follow a 80-year-old man was really bored me, as he couldn't do much in the novel, and having to read his depressing thoughts wasn't fun either. I wish Brian made this character more interesting. He could have either been a younger or in his mid-40s. Also wasn't a fan of the diary scenes, knowing how the story was going to end before finishing it. And the rest of the cast we come to know are either dull, flat, unlikable, and annoying to read. The story barely goes anywhere, as I expected to see more of this flooded world and got none of that. And there was a lot of bad dialogue within this novel, like something out of a low-budget B horror movie. I got so bored I began plowing through the rest of this novel to finish it, and the finale sucked. Nothing exciting, thrilling, or shocking, just a dull, weak ending. Overall, I don't recommend The Conqueror Worms. Not worth reading at all. You can find better monster horror novels than this one. Alright, that's the review today. Hope you enjoy it. Yeah, this is just another short and simple one. There's not a lot to talk about, as this book sucked. So, the very beginning of the book, it starts off with Teddy writing a diary entry recounting the events that have happened in the past 41 days, and I'm like, I already know how this is going to end before I reach the ending. We're going to be introduced to a bunch of characters, and then they're all going to get killed off, and this is the only guy that survives, and he's writing all these events down as eventually he's going to die. I'm like, I know this is going to end. Um, so, at the start of the book, Teddy begins recounting his life when he was a teen and how he lied to join the army, and then later on became like a radio man, and then met his wife Rose, and they had two children, and then uh, Teddy loses his son to the Vietnam War, uh, and then towards like the 90s and 2000s. Uh, he loses his wife Rose, and then Teddy loses contact with Tracy and her two grandkids. So he's like living alone, and he's depressed. And this is the one thing I really dislike with the main character. Uh, well, this is the one thing I didn't like with with the main character is the fact that he's like 80 years old, and I'm like, why did you have to make the main character so old? This guy can hardly do anything. All he does is just sit, read, write, or or is constantly reflecting on his past life and how bored and depressed he is. And like, this is boring. Like, I I'm not saying I dislike like older characters in stories and stuff, but having the main character of like an 80-year-old guy like that can't do much is just not really makes the story interesting. And having to read his constant depression, his depressed thoughts was not fun to read. And then there's one point in the beginning of the book where he wishes to commit suicide because he feels his health is getting so bad that he feels that he would just like his pain and misery to end. But then he goes, "I can't kill myself. It's a sin." I'm like, oh, this is bullshit. So throughout the book, Teddy just spends most of the time alone in his rundown house in Colorado, and then eventually his one friend Carl appears after his house fell through a sinkhole. So these two live together as they're trying to try to keep their spirits up, find supplies, and then they make the risky decision of going to Earl, the crazy religious racist neighbor, who threatens them at gunpoint, and like, I would not even do that. If that were me, I would avoid this person at all costs as possible. Um, and then later on in the book, Teddy has a dream where his wife appears, and she warns him that they're coming, and then people are going to fall out of the sky. And then the next day, life gets even crazier, where Earl shoots down a helicopter, claiming the government came to claim his land. Which turns out no, it's people trying to reach high ground and nearly killed a bunch of survivors that just left New York. So um, Teddy, Carl, and the other survivors they meet, Kevin, Sarah, and Salty. Yes, there's a character called Salty. I don't know why, and it's never explained in the book why this person is called Salty. But anyway, Kevin explains where they came from, and then the story kind of shifts to Kevin's point of view, where he and a bunch of others are trapped in this apartment in New York as they're struggling to find supplies, and they're dealing with a satanic cult that's causing trouble for them. And then later on in the book, the satanic cult kidnaps two of the survivors, and it's up to Kevin and the others to go rescue them. And when they find the cult leader, he wants to sacrifice the two people to the worm god known as Leviathan, and he claims that it's related to Khufu, which I did not like this at all, because it's now like while the novel never it never states where these giant worms came from, but at one point it tries to hint that maybe they're Lovecraftian related, and I didn't like this idea. As to me, this is being lazy. You're just copying someone else's work and using it for your own story. Use your own ideas. Like, it could be based off Lovecraftian, but when an author uses a direct reference to Lovecraftian work, I really don't like that. It's kind of the same issue I had with Clickers, where it gets off to an interesting start with these like crab scorpion hybrid creatures that are attacking this small town off of Maine, and then later on in the book, one of the characters figures out it's related to Lovecraftian, and then it shifts away from these. And then the book shifts away from these creatures being from, something natural to that now. Oh, now they're related to Lovecraftian. That's what I felt with the Conqueror Worm. It was like it starts off where these giant worms are possibly are like mutated or something, or there could be something supernatural. No, the book then the book shifts towards Lovecraftian, and I just didn't like that at all. Um, so after Kevin explains how what he went through and how they got here, then shit hits the fan when the giant worms begin attacking them, and they don't have any, like, barely any weapons to fight these things. And I'm thinking to myself, what? They don't have any gun, like that? What? They can't find like more weapons to fight with for anything. And I was even thinking to myself, after they knock out Earl, if they wish they killed him, because if they did, it would have saved them so much trouble. But they don't. And I'm thinking to myself, that's the other thing I would have done too. If I know someone that's crazy and is unhinged and can become hostile at any time, and I have the chance to take them out to make my life and everyone else's better, I'm going to take that opportunity. I'm not going to miss that. So they don't even bother going to Earl's house to get weapons, as the guy is like crazy conspiracy types. And I think to myself, I bet this crazy asshole has a bunch of weapons stored in his house, and they could have gone over there to grab them to use them to fight the worms. No, the characters don't do it. Instead, they run through the forest with Teddy nearly dying of a heart attack. And I'm like, again, why did you make the main character 80 years old? He can't do it. He can't do jack shit in this book. Like, the other characters have a much better chance of survival than Teddy does. Teddy is like, I think to myself, this guy is gonna drop dead at any moment. I just know it. So these characters struggle to survive the fight the worms, and then spoiler alert, Earl comes back, and now he's commanding the worms, and it's like, where the hell is this story going? It's, as I said, I felt the author could not decide if these worms should be something supernatural, mutated, related to the Bible, or Lovecraftian. All I want is a simple explanation of where these goddamn worms came from, and that's it. And this rainstorm is never explained. Why is it raining all of a sudden? Why? Like, it never explains why. I was kind of expecting at one point the rain to eventually stop. That doesn't happen, of course. And this book is really boring. It doesn't really go anywhere. It only takes place in two places: Teddy's house, some forest areas in Colorado. It does mention the small town that Teddy and Carl live close by to, but it doesn't. The book doesn't really go into detail of what this town is like. And then when it follows Kevin's perspective, it features some scenes in New York, but that's it. I was expecting to see some iconic landmarks like underwater or stuff, or some like ruined buildings. No, we don't get any of that. And that's it. There's anything else that this author puts into this novel to make it better. And I was just really bored. And and the other thing I really hate was the dialogue. The dialogue is some of the worst I read in this book, especially when it gets to Kevin's part, where some of these characters are talking like they're from low-budget B horror movies, and some of the things they say are just like are very cringeworthy, awful. It's like, would people really talk like this in an event like this? Really, like, ugh. And I was getting so bored of this book, I started to plow through it because nothing is happening. I'm really getting bored with it, and when I finally get towards the end of this book, it just gets worse, and then and just like I expected, the ending is just exactly what I thought it was going to be. I knew it. I knew how this book was going to end before I even finished it. Oh, so overall, this was just an awful book, and I'm like, this could have been so much better. While I liked Brian Key's other novel I read, Castaways, which I thought was a really interesting horror novel about like a bunch of people on an island, kind of like a heavily based off the TV show Survivor, and then you got these, of course, like these kind of like ape creatures that are wreaking havoc in the island and stuff, and people are trying to survive. I thought that was a fun book. It did have some issues and problems, but I still enjoyed this book. The Conqueror Worms was one of the worst I read by Brian Keene. And I have some other novels by this author I would like to check out. I heard that Urban Goth is a really good horror novel, and my friend Leon read that one. He said it was really good, so that's probably going to be the next Brian Keene book I'm going to check out. There's a couple others I have on my wish list. I did try his zombie book, and I don't know if I'm going to give that one a try, because that book gets off to that book gets off to a strong start, but then when it goes to the next character, it has the character interact with the zombies and they can talk, and I was not really a fan of that. And then there was a third character that it follows I didn't care for, and I just gave up on that book. And then there was another book that I tried by Brian Keene. It was like set in the 80s, and that one I didn't get into. Like, the issue I had with it, that was that all the main characters, like, they're teenagers and they're all having problems with their parents. It's like, why all of them gotta have problems with their parents? Like maybe just have one is having problem with the parents, but why all three why all three or four of them gotta have issues with their parents and stuff? I just didn't like that book. But overall, I don't recommend the Conqueror Worms. It's one of the worst monster books I've read, and there's like so many better ones you could find out there. Alright, that's for the review today. Hope you enjoyed it, and please don't forget to like this video and subscribe to Conqueror Library, the new channel where I post book reviews, book hauls, and other fiction-related content. Until then, I'll catch you later.